Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya from the comfort of, and I do say comfort because it is pretty chilly outside here over the last couple days.
I'm ready for
like
summer.
Since leaving Lawrence, we just have not gotten
My
warm.
hands have been cold for 4 days straight.
And he sat in a press box, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm not built for it. Not built for it.
Did not stand in the elements like some. Tougher.
Some of us pick our profession. I picked my profession. You chose to be a cameraman.
That's fine. Whoa. Just a cameraman?
Host of the
hell's
YouTube
that?
show. Okay.
Welcome in, everybody. It's Bedlam week. Oklahoma looking to bounce back from a embarrassing performance on Saturday up in Lawrence, 7-1 on the season. And who could have thought? Like, you're going into a Bedlam week in which, I think a lot of people about a month ago would have thought that Oklahoma would be a double-digit favorite. And not the case as Oklahoma goes to Stillwater. And what is somewhat, I don't know if we've talked about this, elimination game for the route to Arlington or getting to Arlington, trying to play in for a Big 12 championship?
Yeah, look, anything can happen in college football, right? Teams could slip up in the final 3 games, but I definitely think it is somewhat of an elimination game. And I think that this Oklahoma team still believes it's a college football playoff contender. We're going to find out tonight, Tuesday night, the college football playoff rankings, but I think that they're very focused on not so much this being the last Bedlam. I think obviously guys understand the importance of this type of a rivalry game, but they still believe everything's still in front of them and that this is a week that they need to get right, that they need to perform better. It's not so much about playing Oklahoma State as it is, hey, we need to be better in this many areas.
An October loss is not unfamiliar territory for Oklahoma. They have done this before. It kind of reminded me of times that Oklahoma has had teams in the college football playoff, just in terms of getting right after a kind of, I don't even know what to say. It's like
terrible. It was a terrible performance.
A terrible loss, but they've been here before. Yeah. This program has. Not necessarily Brent Venables' program, but I think everybody knows the history with the college football playoff and Oklahoma. For them to do so, they're going to have to stop Ollie Gordon, and a main key opponent or key component of that would be the status of Danny Stutsman. Brent Venables talked about that on Tuesday. What's his status going into Saturday?
Yeah, Brent, just how's Danny doing? Do you anticipate him maybe being available this week? And if not, how confident are you in a guy like Kip Lewis, who seemed to
really confident in Kip. As I've said before, he finds the football, plays really hard. He's a 2-time, Defensive Player of the Year in the state of Texas from a great program. He knows how to play, knows how to compete. He's really tough. So when he's gotten his small window of opportunity, he's really delivered. I feel good about Danny. He feels pretty confident, but we'll see. It may not be something that we don't know till close to game time.
That was Brent Venables talking about the status of Danny Stutsman. And, for me going into Saturday, George, that might be question number 2 behind the offense stuff, which we'll get to here in a second. But what is your relative comfort with Kip Lewis or Kobe McKenzie if Danny Stutsman cannot go?
Look, you can't replace a Danny Stutsman type player, number one. I think that he's a guy that has obviously done a lot of great things for Oklahoma, is the leader of that defense, a communicator in the middle, getting guys lined up. But I will say this, if there's one position that you feel good about the depth, it's at linebacker. And that's because of a guy like Kip Lewis, who's come in and played really well in the few times that he has gotten in. I thought he played great down the stretch against Kansas, made some really big tackles, which you're going to need to tackle well this week against Ollie Gordon. Then you add in Kobe McKenzie, who really hadn't seen a ton until the Kansas game, and I thought he came in and played really well. So I wouldn't be shocked. Look, I think Danny's probably going to try and give it a go because that's just who Danny Stutsman is. He's going to try his best to get on the field, and I wouldn't be shocked if he goes out there, tests, and says, hey, I can't go. But I think they feel really good about Kobe McKenzie, Kip Lewis, and obviously Jaron Kanik, who had a tough game but has played a lot of football so far this year.
Think about the emotional lift that would come with if he's able to go. I would imagine that, how much does that account for being able to stop Ollie Gordon, who is on a tear over the last 4 weeks since Oklahoma State has started winning games coming out of that bye week, beating the 2 Kansas teams, West Virginia, and then last week against Cincinnati. But I have to think that just his presence alone would lift an Oklahoma defense, and maybe you don't even need that going into a game with this magnitude. but I think it does count for something.
Definitely, and I think even him being on the sidelines on Saturday this last week after he got hurt, him talking to the guys, I think helped Kip Lewis, I'm sure. But I think having Danny on the field would be massive in terms of emotional support and just a guy, again, who's often the one getting everybody lined up.
Sure.
That's the part that's like maybe a little concerning. Now, I don't expect Oklahoma State to do a lot of the same motioning and shifting things that Kansas did, but it would be huge, obviously, to have Danny Stutsman out there. But I think you also have to weigh, is it worth having an 80% Danny Stutsman or 100% Kip Lewis? And I think that's kind of the battle that I'm sure Brent Venables is having, as well as the training staff and everybody else.
A little bit more positive than maybe I was even walking into the stadium today for Brent Venables' press conference, just in terms of hearing him say that Danny feels pretty good about it.
Yeah, no, I after practice yesterday, talking to some of those guys, I thought that there was a chance that we were going to get, Brent telling us he wasn't going to play. I know that you got to talk to Danny on your radio show Monday morning. He kind of said the same thing, that, hey, he's going to do everything he can to try and play this week. We'll see. It is some other positive injury news. Gentry Williams sounds like he's going to be back. He practiced on Monday. I think Brent said today that they're feeling really good about him playing. And then Tawi Walker sounds like he's kind of in the same boat as Danny, though we did see him leave the practice field yesterday. So I think Tawi's going to be good to go. We'll see how limited he is. But Danny's kind of the one to keep an eye on, I think, through the week.
Let's go big picture, because I do want to talk about all the offense stuff. I know that we've talked about it with Josh McQuistion on this show yesterday here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. We've talked about it on the Eskridge Lexus postgame show, and we'll probably talk about it on the Unofficial 40 on Wednesday. But, George, let's big picture. What the hell has been this program's problem post-Texas? I think that, the Texas hangover is something that Oklahoma fans or people, around the program have come to familiarize themselves with that phrase before. Just for you, before we get to the audio clip from Brent Venables on Tuesday, what's been the biggest difference with this group since that Texas game, since the bye week, in the two games that they played against Central Florida and Kansas?
It feels like they've just gotten really conservative, whether it's the offense trying to, just run the ball a lot. I thought it was interesting that Brent said on Tuesday it was a concerted effort the last 2 weeks to try and get the running game going. It really hasn't worked, so I'm surprised that they kept going to it. And then I think on the defensive side, you can tell that they're pressing a little bit. I think that they're trying not to give up the big play, and when you try so hard to not give up the big play, what happens? You give up the big play. And so I think that that's been kind of the issue, and it's just been undisciplined football, Eddie. You look back to why they won the Texas game, they didn't make a whole lot of mistakes, right? They didn't have a ton of special teams miscues in that game, other than some punting issues and the field goal kicks. But you're talking about guys not knowing when to turn around on a punt, you're not having guys on the field at the right time. Those sorts of things I think can hurt you, and that's the difference. And especially on offense and defense, it's just been a lot more undisciplined, missed tackles. That's an effort thing, right? I think Brent kind of said that today. It starts with your attitude when you're talking about missed tackles. So those have been piling up the last couple of weeks. And then you look on the offense, it just feels like they've gone away from what they're good at, which is letting Dylan Gabriel kind of pick apart a defense. And it sounds like they're going to maybe get back to that this week.
Does Brent Venables believe in a Texas hangover? He was asked that today.
When you lack attention to detail at times, when you lack the discipline that it takes at times, this game will punish you if the other team has a pulse. And again, I got great respect for Kansas and what they've done. I think their body of work has been really good, and we jacked around and didn't do the things that you got to do to win a game, and still had opportunities to win the game all the way to the last play, and we didn't. You learned a tough lesson, but I don't look at it having anything to do with Texas. I know that's a popular thing, I'm sure, because of all the attention that that game had, but we've moved on from that game.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of, and what you were talking about before we went to Brent Venables' answer on the Texas hangover stuff, Oklahoma beating Oklahoma. And, you look at the 3 turnovers, you look at the over 100 yards of penalties up in Lawrence. it's undisciplined to a point. Even the coaches can be responsible for that with the 15-yard penalty following the Kendall Dolby unsportsmanlike conduct. So you got to get back to it. I think it's, there's no better game to refocus yourself than kind of that playoff type atmosphere, if you will. It's like it's basically win or go home for all the goals that you talk about at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to this, and I think that after the Texas game, the expectations went up, right? We talked about the acceleration of the program, what Brent Venables can accomplish in year two. I mean, heck, we were talking college football playoff, national title, and I think that it's been a reality check the last couple weeks, and now we get to find out, is this team different than maybe last year, right? Last year's team, obviously they had a lot of issues going on, but they'd lose a game, and that maybe turned into a loss the next week. What's it gonna be for this group? And I think you saw the UCF game, and a lot of people were like, that's their wake-up call. They're gonna figure it out. But it felt like on Saturday against Kansas, they still were going back to some of those issues. Now they've really had a wake-up call. And I think this team realizes it, Eddie. I know we'll get to some of the players in a bit, but they seem pretty laser-focused this week in terms of, hey, we know we played bad, and now it's a perfect week to try and fix it against a really good football team in Oklahoma State on the road. And I think it was also, look, it's cliche to say, but Brent was talking about in his coach's show, pressure is a privilege, right? You hear that all the time from coaches, and it's coach speak. I get it. But I do think that there's a large part of this team that is embracing that and embracing the big expectations this week and the rest of the season.
We were talking about college football playoff. We were talking about maybe Oklahoma making a run in a national championship. We were also talking about a Heisman Trophy quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. And I don't know any other way to say it than he really wasn't given that opportunity on Saturday in Lawrence. And I think that the offensive game planning has been something that has been talked about quite a bit here in the Sooner State over the last 72 hours since the end of that game on Saturday. And Brent Venables was asked about it. And flat out, he didn't come out and just actually say it, but he was asked, do they want to be more aggressive? And his answer was what, George?
He said yes. He was like, hey, we want to keep that aggressive mentality. And I think that's one thing that you can look back on in this season, and not to say that they haven't thrown the ball down the field all year, but I think the offense in general, there's been a lot of moments this year, whether it's SMU, right? They kind of play with their food a little bit. They get a little too cute. SMU gets back into the game. What do? They go down and score when they absolutely need to. Even the Texas game, they're up 2 scores. They get the ball back at midfield. They go 3 and out. Texas gets back in the game. UCF, right? They get down. Oh, we have to score. They figure it out. Kansas, it finally bites them, right? And so I think that that's what Brent's message is. It's not so much throwing the ball down the field. I think they definitely want to do that, and I think we're going to see that more this week because they don't have the weather excuse. We're supposed to have great weather on Saturday in Stillwater. But I think overall you could sense from Brent that he wants the offense just to be more aggressive in general. And when you are up on a team, you put them away.
Oklahoma offense coordinator Jeff Lebby has been under fire from the fans quite a bit here over the last couple days since the end of the Kansas game. What kind of advice is Brent Venables counseling his offensive coordinator? He was asked of that on Tuesday.
Jeff, you may know it, you may not. He's had a rough 2 or 3 days with the fan base. You have to counsel him and say, hey, if you didn't know, this is what it's like, and you just have to live with it.
I had that conversation with our team and our staff several times since I've been here, prior to playing our first game, however long ago that was. That's Oklahoma. That's a place like Oklahoma. So that comes with it. And just stay inside out. You're the one in the arena, you being all of us. And, again, you have an appreciation for the support. But there's craziness to all of it, and I love the passion and the energy. And when things don't go well, hey man, they have a right to be pissed, but you have a right whether or not you listen to it and let it affect you or not too. And so I've told the players and the coaches and the same stuff, man. Just don't live in that world. It ain't ever going to be good. And if you're just taking a peek, certainly after you can win and take a peek and it ain't good. And so just, I don't know, man, I just don't get your value through that, through the applause, through, having a respect for it, an appreciation for it, have an understanding for it. But, again, don't value the opinion of people that you never seek advice from. I believe in that. And understand that also, that goes with your, when you're at a place like Oklahoma and on this stage, there's scrutiny that comes with it, with that title, with that job, and even the players. I hate it. The players there, their body of work is always under a microscope. But that's the way it is in all sports, every level. And so I don't have to counsel him. He's a grown man, but we're all close, and I'm constantly trying to nurture mindset too, because I'm fully aware of everything, both the good and the bad. And when you're doing really well, successfully, I try to keep everybody focused on the right things. That's my, job, as a leader, too. Let's focus on the controllables always, and focus on our players and our locker room, and again, what we got to do to get better.
I don't think it needs to be reminded of Jeff Lebby. I mean, the guy went to Oklahoma. I think he's very well aware that people are pissed off right now about the offense.
He's upset as I would assume he's as upset or more upset than all the fans calling for his job.
Sure.
And
I don't think that we're sitting here defending Jeff Lebby
either.
I think that
it was a terrible game plan.
I think we both thought it. We talked about it on the instant reaction. We've talked about it on podcast and shows since then that it has to be better. There is no excuse to basically take the ball out of Dillon Gabriel's hands, especially in the fourth quarter, where a place that he has been very good this season.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to my dad about this, and he brought up a good point. He said a lot of times coaches, when they have a bad game, they go back and they reevaluate what they're doing, and they come back and they have one of their better games as a play caller moving forward. I expect that from Jeff Lebby. I think he's going to go back, kind of say, hey, let's get back to the basics. Let's simplify what we're doing on offense, and move forward and get back to, again, letting Dillon Gabriel kind of move this offense in the direction that they want it to go. Get back to some of what they were doing on the ground game, and I think they maybe have found something too in the ground game moving forward, especially with Tawee Walker. So, look, we'll see what Jeff Lebby can do this week. It's a big week for him in that offense, but at the end of the day, I do think that there was probably some behind the scenes, discussions between, I mean, even Brent was asked, how involved are you in the offense? And he talked about, hey, we got to get our playmakers the ball more in space and those sorts of things. So I think that Brent and everybody in the building is aware that the offense needs to be better, including Jeff Lebby.
We'll talk about it more during the opponent preview on Thursday. Excited to be joined by Marshall Scott from Pistols Firing Blog, talking about Oklahoma State and kind of everything that has gone into this team that everybody saw the first 3 games of the season, and then the loss to South Alabama, and then the last 4 weeks, coming out of that bye week. Ollie Gordon's been a big part of it, specifically with Oklahoma State defensively, though, and we've talked about this off air. There's going to be opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State ranks 101st in rushing defense, which is a lot worse than Kansas. I think Kansas ranks around 93rd. So Oklahoma should be able to run the football again this week, depending on, we'll see who's at running back. But I think their passing defense is also in the 80s or 90s. They should be able to move the football on this Oklahoma State defense, should be able to score some points. Like I said earlier, no weather excuse. I still am a believer. If it's not raining on Saturday, OU wins that game, not because because the weather actually affected the game, but it affected the way they called the game.
Sure.
I do think that played a big factor in it. So we'll see, but I agree, Eddie. OU should be able to move the ball. The question is, on the other side, can Oklahoma stop Ollie Gordon and force maybe Alan Bowman into some bad decisions?
Something I had forgotten about, and I had to kind of look back at the game notes for this, but last year against Oklahoma State, super aggressive in the first quarter. Dillon Gabriel goes 14 of 18, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran it 3 times for 15 yards and a score, 239 yards, which was a OU record for any quarter. And that was just in Bedlam a year ago when they built the 28-point lead, and then kind of sort of had to basically hold on for dear life. A final score of 28-13.
Got a little conservative.
Which is a common theme. And
Yeah.
I think that, if there is one thing that of a lot of things. If there's one thing that you want to point out with Jeff Lebby and the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma through the first, what is it now, 21 games, 22 games, there are times, and you just talked about it, that things get way too conservative. You got to keep the foot on the gas.
Yeah, and I think Jeff knows that, and I don't think it's a scenario if he's out there saying, oh, we just got to hold on to the lead. I don't know. It just seems like the game plan changes sometimes, or they try to get too cute. Oh, we keep saying that, get too cute. But, that's the biggest issue, I think, with this offense right now, is that they aren't able to consistently move the ball and just put teams away like we've seen in the past with Oklahoma teams at times where they're able to score at will. And just think about how good this Oklahoma team could be when you think about the stops the defense is getting. And trust me, the defense has its own issues and they need to improve, but they are getting some key stops. And if Oklahoma can ever get up to a 2-3 score lead, it feels like they've got their hands firmly on the game.
Somebody that was on the sidelines a year ago down in Norman, didn't play in the game because he was injured, will take his turn flipping sides, and that is Trace Ford, which is kind of a super interesting storyline going into this weekend. He's a captain for the game. I thought it was pretty cool that Oklahoma announced the 5 captains for Saturday are all Oklahoma natives. They're all Oklahoma high school kids, including Trace Ford, going into Saturday.
It's going to be awesome. Awesome for Trace. Big game for him. I'm sure he's going to hear it from the crowd a little bit. There in Stillwater,
it's going to be a unique experience for him.
Oh yeah,
going into Saturday, and just because of everything that goes into it, it was already going to be. But especially at a setting like Boone Pickens Stadium, where it is truly a unique setting, in that those fans are right on top of you.
Yeah, I mean he's certainly going to hear a lot of it, but I think Trace will play well. I think he's a mature kid. Obviously, he's played a lot of football. I think he'll handle that atmosphere pretty well. He just can't let his emotions get the best of him, right, in those big moments on the edge there. But I also think that that's maybe where this OSU offensive line is a little susceptible. Maybe Trace Ford can get after Alan Bowman a little bit. But it's a fun storyline. We don't get to talk to him this week, unfortunately. I believe that was a coach's decision. But, we've talked to him before, and I think he realized when he made the move, the criticism and the scrutiny that was going to come with it.
And he's kind of taken it in stride. I think it's interesting how I know he's on the Morning Animals on Sports Animal in Oklahoma City with Carrie Murdoch. He has fun with it. I think that there's a certain type of personality that you have to have if you're going to make that move. Kelly Maxwell's done the same thing with the Oklahoma softball team. The other 4 captains going into this week, Drake Stoops, Ethan Downs, Gentry Williams, Gavin Freeman, alongside Trace Ford. Mike Gundy did talk about the Trace Ford situation. He was asked about it, as well as Brent Venables at their respective press conferences this week.
I've watched a lot of tape and honestly have not paid attention or noticed. I look at concept, schemes, numbers, what I think ability is, not ability, what to attack, what I want to stay away from, things like that, more so than necessarily who it would be. So I don't really notice things like that.
I don't know. I haven't talked to Trace this week about any of that. But and again, I think these guys that get in the transfer portal, they're going to be celebrated and critiqued, whether it's in-state, rival, or not. And these are tough, difficult, life-changing kind of decisions. So I'm sure a lot went into it. I don't know all the intimate details of. But you're going to be scrutinized no matter what. Like I just reference back to, coaches and the fan base. I would say the same thing, there. You got to do what's best for you, and hopefully people that love you will always support you. Don't necessarily have to always agree with your decisions, but always got your back.
It's always kind of funny to me this week, Bedlam week in particular, just because there are 2 fan bases. They, your neighbors, your friends. You went to college, or high school together, and then you went off to Norman or Stillwater. I know that, George, we've talked about that just in terms of half of the high school probably ended up in Stillwater. The other half ended up in Norman. Same thing at Putnam City North. It's always kind of funny to me that, I think that Oklahoma State fans call it a rivalry. Oklahoma fans don't call it a rivalry. They throw out the all-time record and stuff. Just by doing that, it makes it a rivalry, right?
100%. And I think it's always funny, too, because you hear from the players, and I think that a lot of the players this week are saying it's just another game. And I think that deep down, I don't know if they believe that, but I also know there's guys like Trace Ford that I'm sure is still friends with a lot of the guys on the Oklahoma State team. I know he's posted on Instagram several of his buddies that they still hang out with. And so I think that for the players, they don't view it as maybe the same way as fans do, growing up in it. I mean, my best friends from high school all went to Oklahoma State, and I've gotten texts from them all week about how confident they feel. And then also some not feeling as confident because OSU always seems to not perform well in this game. But it's always interesting to hear the players' perspectives versus the fans. And you have certain players that really don't like Oklahoma State. I mean, Isaiah Coe said that in his short media availability last night, saying he doesn't like them at all. But I think for the most part, it's interesting always hearing the players' perspectives versus the fans, who I do think there's some genuine hate sometimes there, whereas the players, I think they, for the most part, they get along.
Perhaps nobody more familiar with the Bedlam rivalry than Mike Gundy, who played in the game as a player, obviously at Oklahoma State as a quarterback, his brother Cale at Oklahoma as a quarterback. Both were on staffs together, and Mike Gundy on Monday offered a really good tale with Brian Bosworth.
It didn't bother me because we didn't have phones and social media, but it was a rivalry then. Bosworth spit in my face. I spit in his face. I mean, it was actually a rivalry, right? The summer of before my sophomore year, I would go to parties in Oklahoma City and they would say, well, Bosworth and Migliozzo and some of those guys were here. And so I had to make a decision whether were we going to have confrontation there and who was with me. Because, I mean, I'm not going to, those guys, I can kick them in the shin and run like hell, but I'm not dumb. So we had to make those decisions because, I mean, what kind of a frame of mind was Brian going to be in on that point? I don't know. Had he taken a vitamin C and had a few drinks, well, he might not be a guy you want to talk to at that point. He'd get real red and cross his face. So it was a rivalry then. Now it's not as much anymore, unfortunately, because of the way it is. But it's a very important game. I don't want to push past that.
Pretty good stuff with Mike Gundy, talking about Brian Bosworth and them going head-to-head. Mike Gundy, not so good in the Bedlam rivalry. 3-19 as a player and coach, 3-15 as the head coach at Oklahoma State. And over the last 20 years, if you were to tell me that Oklahoma's 17-3 in this game, I just don't know if I would believe it because there have been so many back and forth games. Very few times has Oklahoma walked in as, the quote unquote underdog. They walk into Saturday as, a favorite, obviously, coming off the Kansas loss, George. But it's going to be a lot of fun. This is kind of what we follow college football for, these types of games. And it's going to be fun as Oklahoma makes the way up to Stillwater.
Look, I'm just excited to see what is this team mentally made of. Because if this team is mentally tough like we think they are, they'll bounce back this week and have a good performance. And it's in a big game. And as much as they want to downplay it this week, which it's funny that I think it's pretty different tones from Stillwater and Norman right now. You just heard Mike Gundy say this is a big game. Brent Venables said the exact opposite. He said it's just the next game. And so those two different attitudes. But it's a big one because Oklahoma still has a lot to play for. This is the last Bedlam. If they don't even want to talk about it, it is going to be remembered for some time by both fan bases. And so I think that's what makes this exciting. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. It's, I'm glad Oklahoma State kind of turned things around because there was a moment there earlier in the season where you're like, man, what's Oklahoma State even going to look like in that game? Now, all of a sudden, Oklahoma State also controls their own destiny to the Big 12 championship game as well. It's crazy to think them, Iowa State, those teams that, didn't really perform well early in the season, all of a sudden have things turned around. So it's going to be a big fun. It's going to be a fun game in Stillwater. I think down in Austin, Texas, and Kansas State's going to be a big game. Iowa State's got a big game in Ames. So big weekend for the Big 12 with only, 4 weeks left.
Real quick before we get out of here, how good's Ollie Gordon been?
He's been awesome, man. He's been really, really good. Look, I think that he's probably the best running back in college football right now. The one thing going for Oklahoma is I actually think they're pretty good against the run. I know they gave up some run yards against Kansas, but I do think that they have a chance to maybe slow him down, at least better than what we've seen from the last few weeks. Cincinnati, their defense has not been performing very well West Virginia is not very good in run defense as well. And then who did Oklahoma State play the week before that? I can't remember, but he ran for 200-something yards. He's been phenomenal.
Kansas.
He's been Kansas.
Kansas State, Kansas, West Virginia, and then last week against Cincinnati.
So I don't know. We'll
dropping
see.
280 on people. I don't care who you're playing.
Oh, I know. I'm not.
Oh,
I'm
no,
not trying to downplay
I
it.
know you're not.
But I do think Oklahoma, if they can hold him to under 200, that would be a massive success. And I think Oklahoma wins the game. If they hold Ollie Gordon to under 200 yards rushing, I think they'll win the football game.
God, just think about that
I know.
statement.
I
mean,
know.
that's how good he's been.
Look, he's going to get probably 30 touches.
500-something yards over the last couple weeks
Yeah.
for Oklahoma State, getting comparisons to Barry Sanders. I mean, that doesn't come lightly.
No.
It's going to be a lot of fun on Saturday. And, I think that not to just go all the way back into the stuff that happened in Lawrence, but it starts for me up front in the middle. Like Isaiah Coe, DeJoun Terry, Jonah Laulu, Jordan Kelly, those guys did not have a good performance on Saturday against Kansas. They, I think to a certain extent, they got their ass kicked a little bit. And it's going to be interesting, too, to see, and I think we saw glimpses of it today when Brent Venables was talking about just, in terms of the physicality that they had at the Cotton Bowl. How do you find that again? Because that team that played against Texas, who's really, really good, obviously, they have to, if they can find that team, I think that Oklahoma fans will be happy on Saturday night.
And that's why I think Oklahoma fans are probably frustrated, because they've seen this Oklahoma team play really good football. And no matter what you say about that Texas game, Oklahoma played a really good game that day. And you just hope that wasn't their peak, right? Brent Venables talked about that. You don't want to peak too early in a season. And I think that's kind of the big question. Can Oklahoma get back to what they were against Texas? Because if they can, they are one of the best teams in the country. But if they can't, then they are going to be in some really tight football games down the stretch against teams that honestly they shouldn't be.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting. We'll be back on Thursday for the opponent preview, talking a little bit more in depth about Bedlam, which is going to be the final Bedlam for the foreseeable future. For George, I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here in the Soonerscoop.com studios.